about Kent specifically, and give you all plenty of time to talk about that. Then we're probably, before we take a break, I'm going to bring in some state board standards as well as some research about best practices for what the board's role should be in guiding the long-term financial health of a school district. And then part of that is creating, based off the leadership cycle, which we've talked about before, creating the goals and conditions by which the direction that the board can set, and we're going to specifically apply it to budget development this time. And then we're going to wrap up with just operating protocols as a continuation of our April discussion. If you remember, we did some group agreement conversations. I've taken them, kind of reorganized them, and then we're going to build on them to help support your work, because public education in 2025 is a busy, busy role. So we want to make sure we give you lots of supports and structures to help with that. So first off, let's think about financial sustainability. I brought these because I do love a fidget toy. And it's kind of a fun metaphor also, because building a financially healthy school district, actually, the board has to consider a lot of factors. Building a system that creates the long-term financial health of his school district is actually one of the board's heaviest responsibilities at times, because a lot of what goes into a financially healthy district is not always in a district's control, and it can be pretty complex to make everything line up the way you thought. So let's just think about this for a second. So you have changing student needs. You know, we really had an impact with the advent of smartphones, with student mental health, changing instructional needs based off of technology, AI specifically changing how workplace. There's a lot of changing student needs going on that impacts how you pay for programs, which can impact how you put it together, as well as legal requirements. You know, I just learned of a bill that was passed in Olympia last session that specifically called out a specific vendor that school districts are supposed to use to compost food in their schools, like a vendor. So all the shifting legal requirements can make it really, really complex to figure this out, as well as shifting revenue. We know that the state's financial outlook is not what they were hoping. Certainly sources from federal can be different. That can impact the three-dimensional work as well. And I just wanted to, you know, there could be other examples. I don't know if there's anything that you are really feeling here in Kent that impacts how you build a financial framework to support student learning. But we can think about that as we go forward. Anything pop to mind for anyone? Well, we'll probably talk about some here coming up. So just think about that. Like this is there's a lot of tension going on in here. If you think about changing student needs, when pulling one direction with shifting revenue, pulling another, there's a lot of tension here, and it can be hard to sort out the puzzle, but that's why you have a great team to work on it together. Yeah, absolutely.
Just to let everybody know, our live stream is now up. We will go back and post the beginning of the meeting, the couple minutes that we had, just so everybody can see the continuity of it, but we are on live stream again.
That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so any questions before I hand it over and we go into your budget update? And again, tell me if I need to scooch out of your way. But yeah, go ahead.
All right. President Margell, member of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry, good evening. Tonight we're going to provide you with some budget update. And next to me is our Director of Budget, Ms. Tyler. Together, I was going to say she's going to answer all your questions, but together we will answer all the questions. But before we go into some of the new things that are happening at the state, federal, and all of the district, I'd like for us to provide, or we would like to provide you with some recap of the adopted budget that was adopted in June, what the changes since the budget adoption, the programs that are funded by EP&O levy, and what are the next steps. So in terms of recap, in June or June 25th, the board adopted a budget with a a revenue of $555.6 million and a $570 million in appropriation. That led into a $14.9 million in deficit. The beginning balance at that time were anticipated to be $60.1 million and leading into a $45.3 million in ending fund balance. After the designation, it leads to $39.5 million in unassigned ending fund balance, which is equivalent to 7.3%. The board policy requires that we maintain a 5% reserve. So this is, although you're seeing a deficit, we are still meeting the minimum required by the board. Recognizing that the budget or adopted budget are primarily made up of assumptions, we also provided you with our projected enrollment. And at that time, I shared that the enrollment was calculated prior to the election. And that was an important aspect of enrollment, because what we know now was that after the election, there were several immigration policies that we were uncertain whether it would have an impact to our enrollment or not. And so during that time, we projected a slight uptick in enrollment, and then after that, it would be a flat enrollment moving forward. We also provided you with some information about the programs, and we shared that the special education will have 4,053 students, CTE 2,087, and all the enrollment for MLE and also Running Start. And recognizing that as this numbers goes up and down, there's a corresponding change in our revenue. We also provided you with staffing, and we shared that certificated staff, there will be 2,029 FTE for certificated and 1,219 classified, with a total of 3,249 FTE altogether for the 25-26 school year. 80% of our budget, or approximately 80%, are made up of labor or payroll and salaries and benefits. We also provided you with the general fund forecast, and those are mainly made up of the assumptions. And what you see on the screen here are the assumptions used in creating those forecasts. I just want to note that there were several collective bargaining agreements that will be open in 27-28. And also, when we presented this, there are two bargaining units that has not reached any agreement yet, which were CAP and KOP. We also provided you with the EP&O levy timeline, and we shared that the EP&O, the existing EP&O levy will expire on December 31, 2027, even though we included that on the forecast, assuming that our voters will continue to support the district with the EP&O levy. And so as a result of that, the forecast was calculated. You see here the 14.9 million deficit in 25-26, but of note here is that the deficit, the structural deficit, is continuing on from 26-27 onward to 28-29. As a matter of fact, it's even growing. And as a result of that, our unassigned ending fund balance were dropping quite rapidly, all the way to a negative 14.41 million, or negative 2.4%. We also shared that in order for us to be able to rectify that, because we must maintain a minimum of 5%. So we need to figure out what is it that we need to do to be able to maintain the 5%. And during that time, we shared that we needed to implement budget balancing solutions of $7.5 million each year for the next 3 years on top of each other. Also notice that the $7.5 million solution in the first year has an ongoing impact in the out years. It's because it's ongoing solution. It's not a one-time. And that's why you see them going from year one, and then you see the same impact into the succeeding years. It's because you don't implement reduction and then you restore them. When a reduction is implemented, it stays as a reduction, and so you garner the benefit in perpetuity, all the way to the succeeding years. And so as a result of that, we were able to achieve a balanced budget in 28-29. You see that there is no more deficit. In 28-29, as a matter of fact, it would be a surplus of 2.3 million, and we were able to achieve a 5% minimum unassigned ending fund balance. Well, there were changes since the budget adoption. So fast forward today, many situations had happened, and the first one is that CAP and KSD has reached an agreement since then. The board, the bargaining unit ratified them, and the board ratified them also. KOP and KSD are still in bargaining at this time. We are now hearing, and many of you know, that the federal government is still on a shutdown right now, and part of the proposal, the budget proposal, has a reduction in Title I, Title II, and Title III, and the total between the three of them is approximately 6 million. And not only that, it is proposed to start in 25-26, and there is nothing in sight that that amount will be restored in the future. So in our mind, our interpretation is that once that reduction happens, it would be permanent moving forward. Similarly, in the staffing, we looked at how many FTE have we increased or decreased from adoption to now, and so we tally that the staffing have increased by 30.6 FTE, mainly coming from the inclusive education. And later on, you will see the breakdown of that, but certificated positions are reduced by 9.23 FTE, while classified positions have increased by 39.9 FTE. One of the biggest change that happened since was the enrollment. And so as I mentioned earlier, that we have been projecting them using the same methodology, and as a matter of fact, fairly accurate in the way we do projection. I think the last time we calculated them, the average variance rate for the last 5 years is about 0.18%. So it's almost down to perfection. But then the only thing that changed since was all the immigration policies. And so what we've seen in October 2025 count, it was a decline of 792 students from the adopted numbers. Similarly, in inclusive education, we've seen a decline of 413 FTE from the adopted budget. So here is the similar slide that you see on the enrollment. The blue are the actuals and the projected for the out years. The orange is the new enrollment numbers. And so if you would look at the 25-26, we projected a slight uptick, but what you'll notice here is a drop of 792 students. What we've done, because now this is the new, in our opinion, a new normal, we assumed that the same 792 reduction will occur also in the out years, unless we see a different trend. But at this time, that's what we are anticipating. When we start developing the budget in 26-27, which actually is going to start in the fall, we're going to start recalibrating our enrollment. We're going to study the enrollment projection once again to see if these numbers are going to be the same. If they are not, then we're going to recalibrate them and we're going to present them to you in December. We also look at what happened to our program student count. So as I mentioned, in the special education, we projected 4,053. And our October count, special ed, shows 3,640. Our CTE, 1,999. And you see the decline in enrollment. I'm not overly concerned about the CTE, the running start, and the MLE, because what we've noticed is there's a lot of changes that happened during the year, and it ended up to be hitting the mark. We studied the special education very carefully and look at the transition from October to June, and we feel like there may be a slight adjustment, but not significant, and that's why we had to recalculate our revenue based on this number. And if they change, if we have additional students down the road, then we're going to have to readjust our revenue again. For now, this is the best number that we could find. We also looked at our staffing. As I mentioned, that our certificated was reduced by 9.23 FTE. And these are the breakdown here. You see a 15 FTE reduction in the regular instruction due to lower number of students. But we see an increase in special education by 8.5 FTE, a net of negative 9.23 FTE. When we look at the classified, we see an increase of 39.8, but primarily an increase coming from special education of 38.2 FTE. Overall, you see a 46 FTE increase in special education and about 26 FTE reduction in the regular instruction. And again, the salaries and benefits makes up about 80% of the general fund budget. Resulting from all those changes that you have seen, we have to recalculate our forecast. And what you will see here is the impact of the K-12 enrollment reduction, which is 8.2 million reduction in revenue, a reduction in inclusive education enrollment, a 6.2 million impact, and a reduction in federal funds, Title I, Title II, Title III, which is about $6 million. And so a total of those three is about 20.4 million, but you'll notice that they are also affecting the out years because we think that the enrollment is not going to recover from where we're at right now, both for the K-12 and also in the inclusive education. Similarly, in the federal funds, we don't have any information whether that amount is going to be restored in the future, and that's why we had to consider an impact in perpetuity on the next succeeding years. The one thing that I'd like to mention here is that this forecast assumes that we're going to end the year, this year, 24-25, with $60 million ending fund balance. It's an important information because any fluctuation in the ending fund balance for 24-25 will affect our future years. And so at this time, we are projecting that we're going to end with $60 million. The books are still currently being closed, and the final close of the books will happen the first week of November. So we are constantly monitoring what that number will be. Assuming no changes in the expenditure, if we don't do anything on the expenditures, our ending fund balance will be at 3.5% for this year, all the way down to about negative 16.1% in the out years. And so this forecast may change periodically due to the additional changes, like if the enrollment change, increase or decrease. Ending fund balance, if we realize that we have 62 million or if we have 58 million, this forecast here will change. And any other grants that we may get throughout the year, we will reflect them in the budget. The next slide here shows, in order for us to maintain our 5% unassigned ending fund balance every year, we need to determine how we would be able to rectify that, or how we would be able to solve that. And the first thing that I would like to note right here is that we will be using our ending fund balance, or our fund balance, in order to balance them in addition to an $8 million budget balancing solution for 25-26. And remember that we lost about 20.4 million. But notice that we're calculating an 8 million expenditure reduction or budget balancing solution for 25-26. The reason is because we're using 12.4 million coming from the beginning fund balance. And what that will do is it would exhaust the fund balance all the way down to 5%, which is the minimum. It's really, and I think the significance of that is that as much as possible, we would like to preserve, particularly since our budget is about 80% made up of labor, we would like to preserve as much as we can by using our beginning fund balance. And that's why, even though we lost $20.4 million, we're only looking at about $8 million in a budget balancing solution. Next year in 26-27, in order for us to balance the budget, we need to come up with about $30 million in budget balancing solutions. And again, these are ongoing, meaning like once we implement them, they stay, and that's why you see the benefit in perpetuity. Together with the 30 million, it would be all ongoing solutions. And then finally, on the last year, 28-29, it would be 2 million. And the 28-29 is probably, it probably is going to change because many things would change from now until 28-29, but we just have to calculate what that amount would be to maintain the 5%. These are large deficits, and what we would like to show you in the next slides is why are we here? What are those elements of the budget that actually is leading us into a big deficit? And one of them is the over formula cost, which is the amount of money that we get from the state versus how much we pay our employees. And so here there are two elements to them. One is the difference in rate that the state is paying us per FTE. And then the other one is the number of FTE that they are funding us. So for example, if you would look at the first table, the certificated instructional staff, we get about 94,000 funding from the state per FTE. Classified, we get 67,000, and certificated administrator, we get about 140,000. But if you would look at the second column, that is the amount that we pay our employee. 109 for certificated, 83 for classified, and 185 for our administrators. On each of this category, you see that we are paying more than what the state is funding us. And if you apply that with the funded FTE, this is all that the state is funding, 1,777, it amounts to approximately 34 million in unfunded amount. The second part of this is the number of FTE. I shared that the state is funding us 1,777 FTE. We hire 1,915, and therefore there is a total of about 137 FTE that the state is not funding, and therefore that amount is approximately $15 million. Just between the two of them, it adds up to about $49.5 million in unfunded staffing costs. The next one is inclusive education. You see here the historical information, revenue and expenditure for special education. We have the estimated 24-25 because the books are not yet closed, and then the adopted budget in 25-26. And you would see that our deficit is from 17 million all the way to 26 million, but it has grown to 31 million in 25-26 just because the revenue has dropped by about 6.2 million. When we look at our MSOC, we also are funded for MSOC. We get about 41 million in the current year, 25-26, and our anticipated or budgeted expenditure is about 71.5 million, and therefore it shows a deficit of about $30.6 million in MSOC. When we look at transportation, transportation is funded at about 19 million, and the expenditure is about $1 million more than what we're bringing in, and therefore a deficit of about 1 million in transportation. When we look at our multilingual education, we get funding from the state, and it's growing, but our expenditure are also growing just as much. And so if you look at the deficit, they're growing from 3.4 million 5 years ago to about 8.8 million in the current year. Dual language is a program in the district. We do not receive an additional revenue for this, but it costs from 5.8 million to 6 million every year. thus all the entire amount is covered by the basic ed. And then when we look at highly capable, we get approximately about $1 million, and then we spend about 2.8, and therefore our deficit is about 1.9 million. So all of those slides that I showed you, I summarized them in this chart to show how much the state is funding and how much the district is spending. And the difference between the two is about 123 million unfunded amount. And when you look at how much our EP&O levy is, it's about 81.1 million, which, by the way, that's the amount EP&O levy covers a portion of this unfunded amount, which is approximately 66%. And so we have a bigger deficit than what the EP&O levy could cover. And this is the reason why we have to tap into our ending fund balance to be able to maintain our reserve. So in terms of next steps, ending fund balance, as I mentioned, that the books are not yet closed. We're still trying to monitor what that number is, and we would know by the first week of November. Audit is going to be right after the books are closed. The auditors are going to come in. It is important because not long ago we shared with you that our credit rating has been upgraded by S&P. And it's really important for us to be able to maintain our audit clean so that we could maintain or further upgrade our credit rating. The board budget priorities, we have that on our list, and hoping to be able to have further discussions on it. There would be some bargaining that's going to be happening. KOP and KSD are still happening at this time. FSA, which are our nutrition services staff, and KSD will be starting, or their contract is expiring, and we need to enter into a negotiation. The federal funding status, we're closely monitoring them. I think the last time that there was a federal shutdown, it was 34 days. And so I think we are now probably on the 15th day of the shutdown. And then we need to determine a budget balancing solution of $8 million here in 25-26. And so that's urgent that we need to do that in order to maintain the 5%. In 26-27, the state and federal budget, now that there is a shutdown in the federal government, we don't know how that's going to affect the state. And so we're going to closely monitor that to see what the impact of the district. And again, hopefully in March or April, we will provide you what those impacts will be. And then KEA and KSD bargaining, I think their contract is going to be expiring in August 27. And then prior to that, we're going to be entering into negotiations. So the same one for Teamsters and KSD. And then the budget balancing solution, $30 million, as I mentioned earlier. We need to determine what the makeup of those $30 million. And then finally, the budget development calendar. Ms. Tyler is actually developing them right now. Because of all the things that we need to do, we need to somewhat accelerate those calendar to be able to make, for us to be able to submit to you the budget in time in June. Further, I'm just trying to figure out what would be a good guiding principle now that we have all of this challenge ahead of us. And I thought about the three of them: fiscal solvency, fiscal responsibility, and fiscal stability. Fiscal solvency, we need to be able to maintain capacity to meet the district's financial obligation over the long term without risking insolvency. I think it's really important for us to be, and this is the reason why I kept mentioning about the 5%. In order for us to be able to maintain that 5%, we need to figure out how to be able to come up with a budget balancing solution. We need to stay solvent so that we don't distract ourselves from thinking about the finances rather than focusing into children's instruction. And so it's really important for us to be able to keep that solvency. Responsibility is prudent management of financial resources, ensuring balanced budget, controlled spending, sustainable, effective resource utilization. And I think I've shared with you in the past about in sequence, efficiencies, revenue enhancement, and expenditure reduction. And finally, fiscal stability. to maintain sustainable financial position to support and enhance quality of education. I think it's really important for us to be able to avoid all the peaks and valleys, because I think those actually removes us from the most important thing that we do, is to provide education to our children. If our finances is stable, then we could focus more on children's instruction. And I think those are some of the things that I came up as a guiding principle as we develop our budget, in addition to what Ms. Cass would be providing you. So with that, we could answer any question that you may have.
First, I would like to welcome Director Gregory. And I know that you came in at the beginning of Mr. Parangau's presentation. We just didn't want to interrupt. So. Questions from the board? I'm happy to kick off unless, Director Clark?
I got a hard one for the superintendent. I'm looking at the dual language program, and while it's not a great expense, it raises a question in my mind. And that's obviously, it is a program that is in demand, because very clearly the following things are true. Obviously, a university education still requires some expense in terms of coming up with the language capability. But when I go to look at the Jackson International School at the University of Washington, it dawns on me, the global economy creates an unusual demand, and obviously the entire Western Hemisphere below us has a tremendous amount of trade that is involved through our ports. Whether there isn't some source of support we might gain from the private sector because it's meeting a need for them.
Yeah, I think I would agree that there are probably private sources out there. However, I would come back to the reason we started multilingual programs here in the Kent School District, and the reason the board at the time said we need to do this. It's actually for in support of our students through utilizing language. By the way, Spanish is what we have for dual language. Multilingual, we started with Spanish. We certainly believe that putting resources into that area is important for the reasons you just said. So I'll just start by saying that. The other is that it is not funded by other programs. It's not a supplemental funding program that we can use resources. It is general fund. And so that said, we also support students that may be multilingual as well within that. In fact, the model is a model that we believe in. And so I'll stop there in that we believe in that, and certainly would look for any funding sources that would help us with that.
Mr. Parangau, I think a lot of my questions are just kind of simple answers. Do we have, because I know you were talking about population decreasing, do we have that based off of age or grade of where we saw the biggest reductions in, to see about the longevity of seeing those decreases perpetuating?
We do have the data, but we don't have them right now, but we do have the data by grade level.
Okay.
By school, by grade level.
Do you remember off the top of your head if it was pretty peanut butter spread across all grade levels, or did we see certain areas?
Sorry.
It actually does, it is pretty spread across all grade levels.
Okay.
But with that being said, there is also a bubble that can be identified we seem to be losing our primary grades, meaning like first, second, third seem to be either staying more flat than the other grades or dropping off, meaning leaving. And of course, incoming kindergartners is clearly lower. The rest of the grades seem to be transitioning out, but the higher 12th graders is becoming a smaller grade. Okay, so we're losing them, we're losing numbers off of that end of the scale, per se.
Okay, thank you. I'm, on the revenue side, when we were looking at that, I think on ours, it's slide 17, we're seeing the budget projections going up year over year. Yet when you look at what the student FTE anticipated enrollment is, we're seeing that decreasing. Could you explain that to me?
That's 17.
Yep, so if you look at revenues, the top of the revised general fund forecast. So 55 million, 562 million, 577 million, 589 million. So we're seeing revenues increasing.
Yes.
Yet we know we're in a place where we're anticipating reduction in federal and state funds, and we're seeing our FTE of students drop based off of one of the earlier slides. Could you explain how we anticipate revenues increasing, but all of everything that would bring revenues in going down?
Yeah, so what's included in that revenue, the original revenue projection is IPD, which is implicit price deflator, or commonly known as cost of living adjustment from the state. And they're projected roughly at about 2.6 to 2.9% every year. In addition to that, we also projected an increase in our EP&O levy, which is in accordance with the ballot language. There is a slight increase coming in every year.
Perfect. And, sorry, I had one other question. On the MSOC, could you, there just looks like really big jumps. I know, like, from 0.29 to 1.28, that's, I mean, I know that's a relatively small number, but as a percentage, that's huge. But from like 27.93 up to 39.41, the other categories don't seem like they're having the same jump. Why in MSOC?
Yeah, so the first three columns in MSOC, they're actual.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the last column in the adopted budget.
Yes, and what I'm really saying is that the last column is budget, and the last four are actual. So the budgeting process is we actually budget for MSOC, including contingency. In the budget, we put some contingency in it. We put them into the MSOC category of the budget. At the end of the year, when those amounts are not used, then it falls back into the ending fund balance. And so once the 25-26 is concluded, you might see that this number is dropping into maybe about 13-14 million deficit rather than 30 million. But for purposes of budgeting, we put the money into the MSOC. Maybe I'm not explaining it well, so go ahead, Lisa.
You did explain it very well, but just maybe for a different point of view. So remember, or at least we hope, your budget will always be higher than your actual, okay? And so, yes, Mr. Perengrau did explain it, that the budgeted column, that includes our contingency, and we build in contingency on both sides, both revenue and expenditure. And these MSOC object codes, which is what you're looking at here, is just where we place the budget for contingency. So again, the budget will always be higher than actual, so you just kind of have to either know that it's apples and oranges as far as to compare actual to a budget, but just know that, okay, I know that budget's going to be higher by X amount of contingency, which is, usually at the start of our budget is fairly significant. It runs about $5 million on each side of the ledger for revenue and expenditures.
Okay, that frames things for me. Very last question. Of the programs supported by the EP&O levy, I see special education, MSOC, transportation, multilingual education, highly capable. Are those the only programs that are supported by the EP&O levy?
These are the programs that generates revenue, but not enough. The revenue that we get from the state is not enough to cover all the expenditures. Now, notice here that dual language is not here. And the reason is because dual language do not generate revenue but we spent basic ed funding on it. So what you see here are only those programs that generates revenue, but not enough to cover the expenditures to run the program.
But to be clear, when we're looking at different things, there are other categories which cost funds within the district that are not included here. I'm just going off the top of my head here, like athletics.
Well, athletics would be part of MSOC,
Okay,
yes.
so there's, dual language would be under,
Well, dual language there are,
general ed.
well, general ed, but they're mainly people, but they don't generate revenue. So one other way to do this chart, if we want to include all of them, would be there would be a category that has zero revenue and some expenses on it, like dual language. The statement that we're trying to make in this chart is to say, here are what the state is funding us for this program. Here is how much the expenditure that we're spending for those programs, and the expenditure outpays the revenue. And so the dual language is a program that is decided by the district, not mandated by the state. And that's why we did not include them right here, but we could to, for purposes of determining what the total shortfall is.
No, thank you.
So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of the totals here, because I was doing some adding of everything. The total reduction through 29 school year, the 28-29 school year, seems to be $205.6 million. Am I correct in that? Yeah?
Yes.
And so we were off on our projections by about 4.6 times the amount, because we were at 45 million through 28-29 in our previous projected budget. I'm curious, how much different is that for the surrounding school districts? We were talking quite a bit during our last presentation of how much better off we were versus the districts that are surrounding us. Are they having the same problem? Are they facing adjustments that they're having to make due to reductions in enrollment and whatnot of this sort of magnitude?
So we received some data after the September enrollment count from our surrounding districts, and I think there were about 13 school districts who are experiencing about the same trend like we are. Some of them are larger than ours, like the reduction in their enrollment are larger than us. Of note would be probably Lake Washington and Seattle, Auburn are experiencing the same. There may be a few others, but I just don't remember who they are. So.
Yeah, the data that referring to actually quoted some of it in my superintendent's report a while back, if you recall. That comes from our region, PSCSD, who collects, and that's September data. So as you saw, data continues to change, and so that was the September data. We needed just a quick, so what's happening out there? So I'll share that. The other I'll share, if you look at state data, heard from Superintendent Rechdahl yesterday. If you look at total number, we're down from a state perspective. Now we're just trying to figure out, like you heard today, what is causing some of that, where is it, et cetera.
No,
I also had an MSOC related question. When it comes to the inclusive ed, it's a pretty big jump from the actuals to what the estimate is going to look like from 24, 25, all the way through 26. And so what's contributing to a over $8 million increase from last year to this year regarding MSOC and IE?
So what I don't have here in this chart are the number of students from 5 years ago to today. I think the enrollment has grown by about 400 students from 5 years ago to now. Now, the growth in expenditure you may see that it's not commensurate to the growth in student. Like, I think it has grown quite a bit from 58 million to 97 million, yet the number of students only grew by about 400 students. And that is the uniqueness of the special education program, is that we don't always know, as much as we would like to do accurate projection, we don't always know who's going to come at the beginning of the school year about type of severity of the cases we get. And so for every situation that we get, we do an IEP, and sometimes the IEP would require a one-to-one as opposed to a group environment. Sometimes we don't have a specialist in the district that we need to hire an agency staffing to be able to address the needs. And so the increases in cost in general, including staffing and MSOP, is related to the uniqueness of the program. And so we respond to what comes our way or what we get or what the students that shows in our door and address the need as they come. And this is the summary of all of that. The expenditure that you see here is the summary of all those needs that have been provided to those students.
Yeah, so when it comes to like the one-on-ones and the staffing, wouldn't that be lumped under the salaries and benefits and not MSOC?
The one-to-one generally are on the salaries and benefits, but as you may imagine that the hiring sometimes is difficult. We have, if you look at our vacancy rate, we have about 142 FTE vacancy as of today. Majority of them are special ed staffing. And so if we have the IEP and we don't have the staff, sometimes we have to go to agency staff.
Oh, and that's MSOC.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Clark?
One of the ongoing things that takes place every year is retirements. And when I look at the 49 million total unfunded staffing cost, there has to be a shift in some of that money because you've got older people retiring. And for instance, in the administrative side, they retire, you put someone new in there, but they don't come in at the same cost. So that's an ongoing change that takes place, and I realize you can't hit it perfectly because of the way it is.
Yeah, those are actually good assumptions. However, when there is a natural attrition due to retirement or resignation, particularly a more senior staff, when you hire the replacement, they're not always at the beginning of the salary schedule. If they're coming to our district with a experience from other districts, we have to recognize that also and place them in a salary schedule where it fits their experience and credentials and things like that.
Yeah, if I could also add, there's also what is termed leave replacements. There are staff that are on leave replacement, so we have a staff there until which time that staff comes back. And so just as another variable, that's also there.
I have a question.
Yes. Director Gregory?
When we talk about, I'm on slide number 19. When we talk about state funding versus actual staffing cost, and we have the over formula cost, I just want to clarify the differences between those three levels. So we have the certificate instructional staff, we have the classified staff, and certificated administrative staff. Can you give examples of each one of those so we can clarify what we mean by those?
Yeah.
I think we know, but others would not.
So certificated instructional staff are mainly our KEA classroom teachers or teachers in general.
Okay.
And also ESAs, nurses, psychologists would be part of the CIS. Classified staff are all classified employees, including a non-ref classified management. Like myself and Ms. Tyler here would be part of the CLS or classified staff. Certificated administrative staff are principals, assistant principals, and any certificated non-ref management are also part of the CAS.
Okay.
Certificates, classified staff, our largest being our paras?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I
Yes.
didn't hear those said out loud, so I thought we should add those.
Yep.
Can I ask a question about, again, this is just so I understand, sometimes things kind of are on top of each other, right? And so like, I think about a multilingual student that is in high cap, or a twice exceptional student that both will be inclusive ed and in high cap. How is that shown here in these charts?
The expenditures that you see here represents the amount spent for every student that is in the program. And so if you have a child who is on both programs, the expenditure for that child is reflected on each of those programs. Now, in the enrollment, I don't know, Lisa, if they are counted twice, a duplicated count in the program enrollment?
Yeah, they would be. So, for example, if you have a special ed student, so they would be included in the special ed enrollment counts. And they could also be in,
MLE, let's
I'll
say.
say the CTE program. They could be taking a CTE class. They will also be included in the CTE counts.
Okay.
So really, any program that they're in that we're paying for those services, that enrollment drives the funding and it drives the expenditure. Does that make sense?
So, but if a student, let's say, is multilingual and they're in a highly capable program, would the expenditures for anything that we have for multilingual show up in highly capable?
So let me try this. I know exactly the question, so I always start off by saying our kids are general ed first, so they're the general ed FDE. If they qualify for services, they would qualify in that, for that service, so that would be supplemental in nature. For special education, for example, we have IP or integrated program, general ed, they receive some support depending on their IEP minutes. They would be counted in the IP
Bucket that we're
Yep,
looking at
mhm.
today. Okay,
They're-
so
yep.
it wouldn't be based off of like what classroom they're
Exactly,
in?
yes, correct.
during the- okay.
So now move to the MLE, same thing. They're a general ed student in third grade, and they qualified, they receive the services on top of that. Their FTE is general ed first.
Perfect. What additional questions do we have from the board? Mr. Perrigo, you did
Do
great.
we anticipate, I do have one question, I'm sorry. Do we anticipate, I understand that the government is shut down and we don't have any of those no numbers, but are we getting updated guidance from them or from the state at this point on when we're going to have information? I mean, I know we're at day 15, so I
Yes.
get that, but like, are they still saying, hey, it's going to look like this, or are they revising that? Because I know that that's been a hot topic for people.
Yes, we are getting, I mentioned earlier today that just yesterday, Superintendent Reichdahl has regular, I think they're almost weekly now, they're getting updates. In addition, our finance team will get updated information from their colleagues from around. So we have every area covered in terms of what's going to happen. And so, yes, we get regular updates on that, and we'll do the same to our board and us as we hear it. But that's the best we know today, what we shared.
The other question I have on that is, I know that we have a lot of capital projects and things that are going on, and with tariffs that are now rolling out are we seeing increased costs in any of those contracts? And are we being proactive and talking to our different people? I mean, like plumbing supplies are coming in and we're paying $500 for a part that was $2 last week. That's an extreme example. It's probably not that much, but I'm just using it as an example. Are we seeing that across the board, and have we talked to our different maintenance staff and where we can control those costs?
So we are anticipating increase in costs moving forward. The projects that are being implemented right now has been bid previously before
Right.
the tariff.
Yeah.
And so I think we're still using the costing and the pricing prior to the change in tariff. But moving forward, if we were to bring to you a new bid, we anticipate that that's going to be higher.
So we should also anticipate that if we look at those capital projects that are coming up, that we would probably have we're gonna have to go back and look at those costs again, even though we've approved them or whatever has happened, because of those tariff costs.
Yeah, and so we will try to continue with the plan, whatever the construction plan and
Right.
so on. Down the road, when we experience high escalation costs, yes, we will be recalibrating which projects are going to be probably not going to be done, or what project we might be, we need to change the specs in order for us to be able to implement the construction. As of right now, we don't know yet what the pricing is going to be. I mean, in addition to potentially short laborers, that could also potentially have impact in the escalation.
Right. And my other follow-up to that is, for transportation, I know that when we switch the gas profile, our gas cost goes down. I haven't seen that at all. Are we still estimating it at the higher cost that we are currently at? Or are we gonna see that trend down because because it's fall, and so the gas price goes down? Or it should.
Yeah, I think those are being closely monitored by our transportation department, but remember that the diesel is also, the rate of the diesel
Yeah.
is also going up.
Up.
So while the usage might be coming down, the rate is actually going up. And so I think we need to balance the two. You might not be able to see the savings because of those two elements.
Right, because the two compete with each other.
Yes.
Because we have gas-powered and diesel-powered items, and those two are canceling each other out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just confirming, any other questions from board members on the update? That was a really thorough update, which is helpful. So we were just saying I was going to do a break in 2 slides. I think we'll do it now. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break to stand up, and then we're going to talk about the board's role in this process moving forward and some ways to frame it to support the district and support you all. And so we'll just dive in 5 minutes. Sound good?
If I may very quickly, just wanted to thank our team. You see the two here, however, they would be the first to say there are many people in their team that have been joining together, and as you might imagine, things change almost daily. And so I wanted to thank our team for their presentation today.
Yes, thank you for the work. See you back here at 6:13?
back on the live stream also. So, great. So now we're going to talk about the board's role in this process. So it's one of, I think you remember when we've talked before, the image of gears, where you have the board's responsibilities, the superintendent's responsibilities, and the staff's responsibilities. The idea in any area of work in a public school district leadership, you want those gears to really be clicking along. So we're going to spend a little time talking about what that looks like and what we can learn in order to really get prepared for the work you have this year. So $8 million of budget balancing solutions going to be proposed for this year, which the process is here. And then also you will start the process for next year for the $30 million, right? So we're going to work on getting you all prepped for that. So, and something Vice President Cook talked about was, the idea about some historical purviews, asking about, okay, what are similar waves hitting other districts that are hitting Kent? And I thought this might be helpful. It helps to plan efficacy, long-term strategy. It really can inform your work going forward. So I did a little research, and yes, the answer is yes. So when you look at public education in Washington State from the 70s to 90s, it was pretty much the boom times, right? So after the big Boeing billboard about turning out the lights, after that era passed, and you had some tech companies coming in and Boeing recovered, you had a lot of boom, and revenues for school districts were up. And then what you had come 2000 through 2012, an era of actually financial instability. It started with the dot-com crash, and then you had the Great Recession, where in 1 year, between 2008 and 2009, the Olympia had to cut a third of their budget overnight, and that obviously slashed school budgets quite a bit. And then you have the landscape that developed, that set the ground for the need for the McCleary lawsuit. So after the dot-com crash and the stress put on the system by the Great Recession, the financial system never quite recovered, hence the McCleary lawsuit in the state, which forced the state to relook at how to do financing in general. And then from 2012 to 2019, with that era, obviously things improved from a financial standpoint. So you up in the 70s and 90s, down in the early 2000s, back up in 2012 to 2019, and then of course you have the post-COVID years. And it's not just about helping students recover from the pandemic. You actually have economic volatility, which you all have just talked about, declining birth rates hitting the country and actually the world, declining birth rates, inflation, and those complex student needs. So now we are seeing, just in general, we are in the middle of that. And a way of quantifying that and how it impacts is, have you all had discussions around binding conditions and what that system is in Washington State? So binding conditions is a process, excuse me, I have the worst tickle in my throat tonight. I sound very raspy, but and I do have water, Naomi, so thank you. No, thank you, I'll just turn off my mic. There we go. So what happens, there is built into state law a procedure by which if a school district, correct me if I'm wrong, a school district cannot, it does not have a positive fund balance. There is that's the triggering mechanism where the state comes in and starts taking over control, frankly. So that law has been in effect for a couple of decades, so you can see the wave over the years. So I'll just read this. I tried to kind of put it on the timeline so you could see. So the number of districts in Washington State that have been formally put into binding conditions, in the year 2000, there was one. And then in the year 2008, so that's the Great Recession, there were 3. And then it went in 2012, people were still recovering. You had 2 districts in binding conditions. In 2018, there was 1, so the state's starting to recover. In 2023, 5 districts in Washington in binding conditions. This year, there are 6, and there are 14 other districts under warning from OSPI. So this is information you can find, that's where I looked it up on OSPA's website. So that you can see we're definitely in an era where financial conditions, for all the reasons making this such a puzzle, putting a lot of pressure on school districts. And that's just something we all have to deal with, right? It pulls on our schools, our students feel it, we definitely feel it, our communities feel it. And that's why it's lovely that you all are spending the time investing in how to look forward in order to support the communities and students going forward. So let's start thinking about, okay, what is the board's role in this process? So in general, and I've introduced this to you before, there's what we call the leadership cycle with school board work. So basically, whether we're talking, adopting curriculum, setting a strategic plan, also policy development, there's a cycle that we call the leadership cycle where the board sets goals. So basically the board, if you want to use the bowling lane analogy, the board sets the bumpers where the district leadership can send the balls rolling down, but the boards have set up those goals, those parameters, those guidelines in whatever realm of the work we're talking. And also part of that, working with the superintendent and therefore staff, talks about how to identify progress against those goals. So maybe with a large curriculum adoption, perhaps a new math curriculum adoption, you would say, okay, here's how we're going to identify whether this investment in professional development plus materials, whether it's getting us the improvements we're hoping for. Let's talk about those goals. Then you monitor progress over time on a schedule. And then perhaps you have to adjust the goals. Maybe there's a different technique needed, things like that. So this applies to budget processes as well. And it applies to when you have to face constricting resources. So both in the boom times and the downward slide, it applies as well. And if you remember, I introduced these Washington State School Board standards. Think of the timeline I just showed you. These were written they started in 2000. Okay, so the standards have really held up through those different economic cycles, and so we're going to leverage them today to help support you all and the governance team going forward. So within here, and it's kind of small text, but under Standard 3, which is called Creating Conditions for District-Wide for Student and Staff Success, it talks a lot about budgeting. And so if you really want to see it, it's under Benchmark 3E. But this is talking about, the annual budget process. And there's 5 different elements that the standards identify that produce long-term positive outcomes for students when a district goes through them. So I'm going to quickly, for our friends at home as well, I'm going to quickly read them, and we're going to see how they fit into that leadership cycle, okay? So under 3E, number 1 is, does the board keep all segments of the community informed about the financial needs of the district and invite public input to the process? That's 1. So that's talking about how those goals are created and the bridge that the school board is to the community. Number 2 is, does the board provide guidelines for budget development, including a clearly defined expectation for a reasonable ending fund balance? I've heard about your fund balance policy, 5%, there you go. Number 3 is, does the board adopt a fiscally responsible budget and for your projected budget that's aligned with the district's vision and plan? You all do, we have seen that. Number 4, does the board regularly monitor the budget and fiscal status of the district? That's your ongoing reports from staff, and that's always something, that's the monitoring progress aspect, right? And then number 5, does the board adopt a budget that adequately provides for student learning, safety, and wellness? So if we take these 5 and try to layer, I hope this reads well, I've categorized them all. So we have some that are in that create goals section. We have some that are in the monitor progress section and some adjusting goals. So within the state standards, awesome. They have fit into that. I'm bringing this somewhere, I promise. I'm talking a lot here. But for tonight, there's an aspect that can be a unique tool that can help a district move forward in an era of on the downward slope of constraints on resources is how I like to think of it. And that is the second one. Does the board provide guidelines for budget development, right? Including a clearly defined expectation for the fund balance. So when I was here in April, we talked about budget priorities, right? And we approach it with the lens of the upward slope, right? Because post-McCleary, that was the practice in most school districts across the state. You know, when the board is setting guidelines and you're on the upward slope of the economic cycle, that how this was done in April made a lot of sense. We're not on that part of the cycle right now. So setting budget guidelines for the district looks different now in the board's role. So if you think about it, the guidelines purposes shift. They are a communication from the board to the superintendent and therefore staff about how to evaluate trade-offs, right? Because when you think of, you have a large budget compared to the rest of the school districts in the state. $8 million is significant still, $30 million as well. There's trade-offs and balances and all sorts of options that staff will be starting to process, right? Helping guide staff in terms of how to balance which trade-off to start to really invest energy in. That's one reason to think about I'm going to call them guidelines for the budget process, okay? For the board to set clear guidelines in terms of how those trade-offs can be thinking about. Another thing that's really helpful is that, again, if you think about number one, communicating to the community about this, by the board having some guiding principles around how this work should be going forward, it's not that the board is making the decision, the board is communicating the values and the priorities that can be adjusted over time, but it gives a little bit of foundation for the community to understand the thought process, because this gets technical fast. You know, when you start talking MSOCs and MTEs, and I mean, it just gets into weeds really fast. It can be challenging for the community. So having guiding principles sets the leadership foundation to help the community understand, because this can be hard for the community who has been used to the post-McCleary upswing as well, right? And it's also a time-saving device as well. But instead of having a constant iterative, you will have to do some iteration where proposals will come, the board provides feedback, you know, there's probably going to be other feedback mechanisms as well. The staff goes back, crunches more numbers, comes back, okay, here's another thought, right? So it's an iterative process. But by starting with some guiding principles, it kind of brings that up a step, right? Saves you a little bit of time as well. So the idea is, so as we know, trade-offs have to be made. What factors and requirements would the board like the team to prioritize, right? When creating proposals. So this is not, so I wrote this down. What this is, so this is a list of factors, somewhat general, right, that provide guidance without constricting brainstorming. Because you have a great staff of very creative people who know this district so well, know instructional programs so well. You want them to think, okay, where are some efficiencies we can find? You know, where are some areas where we can, create some balancing solutions in a way that minimizes the impact to students? You want that brainstorming created, so you don't want to get too tight with these to keep that brainstorming open. But what this is not the final list. Okay, so this is not even the bumpers on the bowling lane, if it helps. This is not meant to cut right to the end solution, but to help support both the system and the community going forward. Because you could have a list of guiding principles for this year with the $8 million scope, and then after seeing that process, revisit them. And the spring, right, or maybe winter, depending how the budget cycle goes for the next year, you might want to rearrange. So this is not written in stone. How's this sounding? Any questions, any thoughts? It's a lot to process in just a couple hours. All right. Sounding good, Tim? Okay. So what I did, because again, you have 14 districts under the watch. My district is one of them. You have 6 districts and binding conditions. There are a lot of districts going through this exact same process right now. It was easy to find a pool of principals to start. So these were, and I just threw them up. I numbered them because the thought is we will look at them, and I'll give you a couple minutes to look at them, and they are in your printout, so you don't have to strain your eyes. But take a look at them, and if you want to make notes, and then I have some prompts just to start thinking about the list I threw as spaghetti on the wall, and we'll go from there. Because the goal is to have a list of 8 to 10 factors, seem to be a number that a lot of districts have landed on, kind of ranked in an order, okay? Because again, the idea is if there is something that's totally off the table from the board, it helps folks to know that now, right? Before they go down the road of investigating an option that the board just thinks is not an option. And then we want it to be ready for the first round of proposals that will be coming for the $8 million this soon, okay? All right.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, you may want to put on your microphone though.
The comply with existing school board policy, I assume that's all of our policies, but is that specifically for most school districts talking about fund balance?
It could be talking about a lot of things. Fund balance is a good example.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of districts make temporary alterations to their minimum fund balance policy. Also, there could be policies that talk about all sorts of programs or facilities or anything like that. That could be a policy change. And that's why also you'll notice calling out to number 3, complying with state and federal mandates. That's meant also to capture legal requirements. So there's a lot of school board policy based off of law that are a requirement of districts, and so the interlacing of those can be complex. But yeah, let's look at this list here and see if anyone has questions on it before we I want to give you a couple minutes to chew on it, but let's go through these. Similar to what President Margle just demonstrated, are there any that you'd like to poke at? Just have questions about before you dive in?
What do they mean by minimize reductions in force? Are they talking about like actually doing job cuts, or does that include things like making the decision to not hire, right? So you have open headcount. One of the things that corporations typically do is they do a hiring freeze, right? They're like, unless this job is critical and it's approved by this person, we're gonna do a hiring freeze. Does that include that, or does that mean we're not gonna terminate people?
Very good question.
So
I could take a stab, but I don't have a degree in this. Okay, so my stab is a hiring freeze doesn't change the amount of staffing level within the district. It just doesn't fill it right away.
Right.
A reduction in force doesn't talk about a specific person, but talks about a role
Right.
that is reduced, right?
Correct.
And so how bargaining contracts can play in terms of how that impacts individual staff based off of seniority, for instance, can play out in different ways, but so far I'm getting head nods, okay. Reductions in force, though, let's talk about, let's say, I'm going to make up an absurd number just because I don't want to trip over something by accident. Say a school has 20 office managers going from 20 to 19.
Right.
Without even talking about who's in those roles, that's a reduction in force.
And it's a permanent, we mean permanent reduction in
Going
force.
forward.
Going forward.
Right.
But this isn't, so sometimes you use the lever of not doing a hiring freeze until your budget comes back, and it can become a permanent reduction in force because you just don't hire for it. But I just wanted to clarify, what was that principle mean? So we mean, in this case, we're trying to say, we want to not fire the office manager, go from 20 to 19. We're
Right.
trying to avoid doing that.
Well, and something to think about too, again, this is to provide helpful information, like having these kind of conversations, even if it ends up being a couple words, but hearing the board in front of staff talk about, okay, when we're thinking reduction of force, perhaps we think about prioritizing those, if there's different roles that the You know, at this point, you may not have to do it, but for the next round
Right.
of budget solutions, you may have to think about, okay, the board would like to, as much as possible, because we don't have a magic wand, try to protect this area more than this if possible.
Right.
It may not be possible.
I'd also wanted to add for the board to also understand there are contractual obligations that would not allow certain things.
Yes.
Or we have to follow contracts for any kind of reduction, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't want to violate contracts or anything. I'm not proposing any of that. I was just wanting to clarify clarify what those words mean. Because oftentimes when we hear that from a corporation perspective, I'm going to just put my corporate hat on. When you say minimize reductions in force, we mean we're not going to lay off anybody, right? We're not going to go through and say, all these levels of this job are going to be terminated, right? That's how Boeing and Microsoft and all the big companies do it, right? They look at across the sector regardless of the person and they do this cut, right? And that's a reduction in force. That is a reduction in force.
Right.
But if you do a hiring freeze, you temporarily get the benefit of not having the spend of the allocation, but eventually you got to hire that person. So really, you're kicking the can down the road.
That was going to be my point.
Yeah.
So there could be different strategies proposed.
Right.
Because ultimately, we had those line items that so cleverly carried forward.
Right.
You need the permanent reduction in expenditures.
Correct.
Yeah.
So a hiring freeze doesn't get you where you need to go.
Right.
It can help you in the short term, but not in the long term because you got to address that. Okay. All right. That was my clarifying.
No, it's a very good, and again, I'm going to take notes either manually or if I have to start typing on my list. I mean, having clarifications on these is a really good idea. So that's going to be my question for you. Please pop up with any more clarifying questions or thoughts or pokings. There might be things on this list that don't need to be on the list. And there might be something else you'd want to put in instead. And you might think that other language would be a better match.
So keep schools open. Obviously, I want to keep schools open. I'm not advocating we're closing schools. When we say keep schools open, we keep them, and then I look down and it says, provide the current operations as much as possible, right? So keep the schools open at the current number and then preserve the current operations for all of those things together. Those seem to me to be similar. I mean, they seem to be like hand in hand, right? We want to preserve the operation as much as possible and keep schools open. That would be, they go hand in hand. Do you guys see it differently?
I see that there could be things that would fit under them differently,
Okay.
right? So keep schools open is, we have X number of elementary schools, keep schools open is saying, after this, we prioritize having the same
Number of schools.
number of schools,
Yeah.
X number, right? The preserve current operations, there's operations that support the schools, but maybe something like, and please someone jump in here, but like,
Yeah.
right now, we transport at 1.5 miles. Maybe we do that to 2 miles.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Or
I get it.
we still have X number of different activities, but instead of 2 times a week, it's 1 time a week.
So you're still doing the operation, but
Yeah.
you're restricting that operation, depending on what it is. Okay.
It could also be, there are some school districts that have gone to 4-day weeks.
Right.
They're still, schools are all open, but they're only open 4 days a week for students.
I think if I could just add, again, back to Amy, so these are not for getting deep into those weeds of
Yes.
that. It's really the guiding principle. The reason
Right.
this one's here, it's really broad how it's even said.
Yeah.
Right.
I
we've-
tried to give those as broad.
Yeah, and that's, and the other piece that I was gonna share is just the reality. We've all heard districts around us that have, quote, closed schools, right? I can't even begin to tell you what everything that came into play for those decisions. However, I can tell you as superintendent, I know what it takes to do that.
Right.
I also know what you may or may not save, and you might think you'll be saving. So I share that in that there's a whole lot more to that. Again, guiding principles are really giving me, as superintendent, some guidelines, some guides,
Right.
so that I can move forward with my team and say, may even come back to you and say, that may not work, because it's really not going to save us what we think it is.
Yeah, because if we were to, for example, if we were to close a school, right? Well, you close a school, oh, we're gonna save X amount of money. Well, no, you're not, because now we're gonna bus all those kids, and now we
Yeah.
gotta have a bus schedule and a bill
Yeah.
schedule and a maintenance schedule, and all the cascading effect of that doesn't actually save you money in the long
Yeah,
run.
because a simple thing, you also could think of, so if the school's operating with X amount of staff, we only have 10 kids in it, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right? So it's broad in nature.
Got it.
Okay. Do we want to take a minute to review? You just kind of think and take notes? I'm happy to give you a couple minutes to do that. If it's something that's, I know sometimes I like to process a little bit before we workshop, but your call.
I'm good to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, if I may, it was just, we talked about the budget updates. So we already have, I believe it looks like 1, 2, 3, 6 or 7 budget dates already on our calendar that we're already coming back to you to give updates periodically, so.
That's really helpful. So because
I wanted to
ideally, this list, we would make a draft and then bring it back to the board one more time. So perhaps at
Yeah, we-
the next budget update would be a great time to do that.
And this wasn't in preparation, but it is what I believe is good business in making sure, you see there, the community is aware, right? And prior to this, I believe it was 4 or 5 meetings that we had last year. And the importance of looking at what we present to the board, as you know, things have changed. We always have provided a 4 or 5-year forecast out there. And as things change, that just keeps changing. So I just want to note that for the board.
Well, then if we're all going to note things, this specific topic was what I asked for in this retreat, because it feels like too often, while we are talking about budget, and that's never been, there's been always transparency in what that is, but our conversations always happen, it feels too late. And so we wanted to I asked for this conversation to start with support of the administration. We were all in agreement on this. It was like, how do we get ahead of this and have those conversations, and especially in a format like this where we can do the brainstorming and the workshopping on this, to be able to talk about it, so we have we're not always chasing behind.
Right.
So that's why specifically we're bringing it up so early in the year this year.
And I think it's important for the board, again, thank you OPMA, since we do this all in public, but the board to have time to process it, right? So doing it together and not having to decide on May 1st, or, not that that's ever happened in Kenton, but, like not having to have that time exactly. And so, because you have to build in all this extra time.
Yeah.
For the board, that's a good point. So what I'm going to propose is we're going to break it into 3 categories, and I'm going to ask for everyone to provide input at each category, and I'm going to document here. And it's, we may have a lot of changes, and we may have few changes, and then we do have to figure out ranking at the end. So the idea being, there could be, if there's something like, let's say complying with existing school board policy is a must-have for the board, we would bump that up to 1. Because the ranking, again, while fluid, will help folks as they're coming up with proposals. So the first question I'm going to ask is if anyone has any proposed changes on language. And I think I'm going to start with you, because you're in the middle, Director Song. Do you have any proposed changes on how any of these are worded?
Nothing's coming to mind.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Director Clark, what do you think? No? President Myrtle?
No, the term vulnerable students, I feel like is ambiguous.
Okay,
I don't know, I don't have a better solution for that.
okay. So what I'm going to do is just bold it here in my own little notes so we can think about that. Does anyone, that's the question, let's throw it out. Does anyone have an idea of, and in what way is it ambiguous so that we can help brainstorm?
Vulnerable in what way? Are we talking like medically fragile? Are we talking about vulnerable for dropping out? Are we talking, like, what do we mean particularly by
Okay.
vulnerable? And vulnerable for not meeting their educational goals, getting lost in the shuffle, like, what does that mean? And I feel like it's just, other things I have, keep schools open. There's not a lot of question in what that means or doesn't mean,
Right.
right? Although I guess we even did talk about that a little bit, but like, but it is pretty, like, either school's open or it's not. But vulnerable students, I feel like that there's, to what does that mean specifically? But I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just an ambiguous term.
Fair enough. Yeah, you have a thought.
Statement one, student programs. And what I'm not getting a sense of is this is defined by what is demanded by law? Is it demanded by district policy? And more importantly, is it, as a mandated service, does it come with additional funding if it's not straight general ed?
Okay. Thank you for that. So, and again, this is a bit of the art and the science, like how specific do we want to get? But if we might, let's see, yeah, no.
All right, I'm just gonna give an example.
Okay.
I mean, that would not be my number one if it dealt with music or athletics or art programs or things that get hidden under other categories.
Right.
Whereas if it is mandated by state law, I don't know how to get out from underneath that to begin with.
Yeah. Well, which also would come into play in number 3, which is comply with the state and federal mandates. Maybe.
I'm still uncomfortable with that because when I look at student programs, if it's an elementary school and this is a 4th grade classroom, they're supposed to get through a rigorous curriculum demand along with setting aside time for exercise, blah, 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 blah. And the question becomes, does the state mandate that says that you have to have so many minutes of exercise have to be executed with certificated staff, for argument's sake? So that's where I get lost in that.
And that might be, that's a good question. And I was going to go down the rabbit hole, and that's not helpful. It's so easy to go down rabbit holes on this. But you know what's interesting to me, I find that somewhat related to what does a vulnerable student mean? You know, services for vulnerable students, right? Like we're talking about all the different kinds of, whether it be instruction or other supports, wraparound supports either. So let's try to see if we can tweak one of these. So, and I'm going to start with number 1 because it might inspire us what we want to do with number 10. But for minimizing impact on student programs, what do you think would be more clear?
Well, first of all, I would have put in student mandated programs because that clarifies where I have flexibility versus you leave it open-ended like that and I start jumping, can I cover with non-certificated staff because it's just requires supervision, and that's where I get lost.
No, that makes sense. What do you all think about that? Minimize impact on student mandated programs.
So my only question on that is, like, if they're mandated programs, how are we able to reduce them in the first place? Like, if it's something, like,
Well,
my
Sam-
understanding of that would have been that it would be the stuff that's outside of mandated stuff, because if it's mandated, what are, like, you know, football isn't mandated. Neither is swimming, neither is, you know, our music programs, our arts programs, every single other program, none of those are mandated. But we're going to keep those, we know that. And so the mandated stuff that we are actually going to be looking at, I don't know how we do that before we get rid of all of those other programs.
Well, to begin with, one of the concerns from an administrative time is you're slugged with such things as minimum time exposure. So yeah, I know very little about.
Yeah, no, first I'm gonna say I appreciate the conversation. I think this is what board superintendent governance is about. It's, what do we all understand about what we're talking about minimizing programs? The first thing I think about, there are required mandated legal obligations for students that qualify for certain things. So take special education, for example. If the IEP is what governs, that's a legal document. So we certainly, I think Vice President Cook, we would not be reducing things that are required, both state and federal. The other piece I will share for the board to consider in the programs would be those that you heard Mr. Parangwell talk about. There are some programs that are not funded. And you heard today there are several programs that are only funded to a certain percentage, and we come up with the rest of it. So when we start thinking about programs, it's in that vein as we're looking at developing guiding principles. That's another way to think about programs.
So maybe what I'm hearing then is the use of the word mandated when we're talking about student programs might not be useful, because that would not be one of the trade-off decisions being considered, right? So perhaps we take that word mandated out, and the question might be, what are there any adjectives? And again, maybe it's the wealth is in the conversation as proposals. And again, it might be helpful for staff to see where this ends up in the ranking. But are there any other adjectives we might want to think about around student programs that would be helpful? You know, there's extracurriculars, you know, there's a lot of adjectives we could throw out.
Question for the superintendent. There are certain things that are mandated by required timing. I mean, obviously, the secondary, it's Carnegie units, but when you get into elementary, isn't there requirements in terms of time on reading, math, science, whatever?
So I'll start with back to the IEP, there are certain required minutes in math, reading, other areas, so that's that. As far as to matriculate from elementary to graduation, you have requirements for minutes, standards, all those pieces. So yes, it's all together as they move forward to graduation.
I feel like number 3 partnered with number 2 kind of are the two different, right? Like when we're talking about mandated state and federal, like I feel like that is all of those things under number 3, right? The programs and the things that we have to have. And then the student programs are kind of those things that our students very directly interact with.
As defined or described in parameters set in strategic plan. Is that what you mean? For number 2?
Well, sorry, did I say 2? Number 1.
Okay.
sorry, number
Yeah.
one, are those things that our students are directly involved with that kind of impact what it means to be a student? Kind of, it's like all of those things that they kind of do. Like, some of them that are maybe outside of that state and federal mandates, maybe, not necessarily though.
But as you as representatives of the community here in Kent have helped work with everyone to pull together as described in the strategic plan, right? In
Yes.
terms of how you want to implement it here in your community. So perhaps number one might not be necessary if we think about 2 and 3. If we think about right, we might want to change that verb comply with strategic plan, but, you know, continue to support the strategic plan, something that might be, kind of put the bounds around if student programs is in itself too vague.
I don't feel like it is.
Okay. Do we think it's too vague? Do we think that student programs in number 1 is too vague? If you consider it in context with the rest of the list. If I'm hearing, is that what you're
That's
mean?
what I was saying.
Yeah,
In
in context.
context with number 3, that kind of, to me, encompasses, if that is a priority for maintaining state
Right.
and federal, then you would prioritize number 3.
I mean, I don't know if we need to have number 3. Like, it's not an option. We don't get to choose to whether or not we're complying with state and federal guidelines. Like, if we don't follow them, there are going to be consequences, and we aren't gonna like them. I promise you that. So I don't see the point in having that there. Now, complying with the strategic plan, it would be good if we can, but when we're talking $205 million over the next 4 years, that amount of money is so much, there's no way we can adhere to that in its entirety. And so, to me, I feel like we need to have more specific goals, and we need to know what those goals cost, right? If we're saying we're gonna, comply with the strategic plan in its entirety, then how much does that cost us, right? How much are we gonna save by reducing what we're doing with the strategic plan in this way or that way? And that's where I feel like we need to have pretty, strong guidelines as far as what we think it should be worked on, and we should be doing outreach to our community to find out what it is that the community thinks is important. Because they're the ones that are gonna be deciding whether or not we get the levy funds next time we run that levy, and obviously we're going to need to. It's not even a question at this point, because we cannot run at this kind of deficit forever.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement. 3 to me is like a given. It's like, for 3 is the one that's like if I look at the whole list, 3 is the one I'm like, well, yeah, we have to do that. Like, you have to do that.
Okay.
So, for me, it's not a principle, it's like, that's a
It's an
minimum
assumption.
standard.
It's an assumption.
It's my assumption that we would
Right.
do that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm striking it in my notes.
Yeah,
What
I get-
do we think about striking that? Is everyone comfortable with that?
I mean, it could, I guess like the benefit of having it on the list would be that we are saying to our community, we will continue to do this.
Right.
And again, it can be on the lower
Lower end.
No, it'd have to be like number 1, right?
Okay.
Like, we will always be complying with state and federal mandates. That's first and foremost. We will always be doing that. We are going to follow IDEA. We are going to follow all the things that we can. Now, if it comes down to the point where we have to start cutting things that are mandated, the rest of the things that we have are probably things that we would have had to have cut by that point, I would imagine.
This is news to me. This came to mind though, when you said that there was a new state law about the way that we should be composting and a particular vendor that we have to be using for composting.
Yes.
What if we didn't do that? Like, I'm sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
putting it out there. So like, I think it's good to put up that this is a priority of ours, but I do absolutely assume in the 295 districts in our state, I'm gonna guess there's going to be at least one that's not gonna use that vendor. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, no, of course, and that's That's part of it though, but we need to know what that cost would be, right? Like, let's say we don't do it and the state has written into that rule or whatever, that law, they've said that if a district doesn't do it, we're gonna charge you $100,000, right? Or whatever it is that they decide is the punishment for that. We have to determine whether or not that, going against that is going to be worth it.
I mean, to be fair, we're still not complying, or the state's not complying with paramount duty anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But when
I
it
think
comes
that's a
to
great
it,
point.
I think, the reason why I'm staying silent on this is because I read this as these are just guiding principles, not like a set of
Yes.
rules and
Yes.
laws that we're setting. And so, for me, I think keeping this information on there is a guiding principle, right? Like, that speaks to what the board's values, missions, and desires look like. And so for me, I'm okay with keeping all the language. I mean, as a board, if we want to recategorize this hierarchical list, sure.
Yeah.
But I guess that's my perspective, is I don't see a need to strike any of this.
No, I agree with you too. That vulnerable was just the only word that I feel is a little bit ambiguous that I had a question on, but I'm fine with it. But I think to your point of, like, these are the guiding principles that we're going to send administration back to and say, okay, so here's your task, give us some options, and what does that look like? And when you're going through and sifting and like, this is what we think is number one, number two, it better go through, I think about it when you're sifting sand, right? You start with the biggest holes and you go down, 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 right? And like, you need to start with number one, and you need to make sure that whatever we decide as a board, that it better really follow number one. But concessions will have to be made further down. It just will, because these are the guiding principles to get there, right? Am I seeing this the same way as other people, like how we're trying to prioritize these as we're coming up with ideas, having them more closely aligned with the ones that we prioritize at the top, and then maybe not as much with the ones at the bottom, knowing that we wish that we could do all of these all the time.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
If I may, I know the question came up with the word vulnerable. I've heard districts use students on the margins or students furthest away from educational justice, students that are, there are a number of ways that we can describe those students that have additional needs, that if the board has a guiding principle to make sure we get them to graduation, those are the things, anyway, so that's one for the board to consider. Then the other one is, it isn't like we haven't been doing these that you see here. This whole activity really is about being able to come together like we are right now and talking about what is it that we mean, so that when we do come together, it is something that we can support in terms of getting to where we are fiscally stable, solvent, and that we're being responsible.
What do we think about that word vulnerable?
I think kind of with what superintendent was going along the lines of, if we were to change it, I would flip the last part of it to be more like, I guess, feed forward in terms of protecting services that uplift or uphold the growth and upwards trajectory of students, or something that says that we're going to protect services that's constantly contributing to, I guess, lifting up students who might need those additional supports. That way it applies to all students.
Let's make sure I heard this correctly. So provide services to uplift students that need additional support.
I guess we could start with that.
We can start with that.
And then just build from
All
there.
right, that sounds
The
great.
words aren't coming to me right now, but we could wordsmith that.
It is, yeah, we can wordsmith that. Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to write that down.
We could also look at something, protect services to those students facing the greatest adversity. Because it really is broad then, and it's like if you're a student that's both, homeless, disabled, and that's obviously that child needs a lot more support, and making sure that they are at least getting the basic services of just being able to get into school might be all that we can do. And the rest of our students are already there, right? And so that's, I guess, where I would say that we start at the very bottom, I guess, or what have you, of those that are facing the most difficulty getting their learning done, and then go from there. And I don't know
No,
how
that
to.
sounds good, and again, this will be a draft for you. So I think capturing elements of both of those actually would make a really strong statement. So I'll myself wordsmith it when I'm not talking at the same time, and then we'll get the draft to you. Do you think that was capturing, does that help with the vagueness?
It does, I just don't know if that would be the, I'm trying to see, for me, vulnerable students is, I think I went to those who are maybe least likely to graduate or complete their programming is kind of where I went to, which is very specific. And so, I was just trying to figure out, like, does that answer that we were giving, does that fit into state and federal mandates already? And so I'm trying to see if, to me, in my mind, was it already captured in one of the other ones? And so,
Yeah, I guess my focal point went to just services. So I was thinking counseling, guidance, educational supports, OT, PT, right? Any service that's necessary so that we can still embody equity, where students have the necessary resources to get them to a point where we want all students to be.
So here's another, this is not mine, this is from Mr. Parenquin. Protect services that eliminate barriers to learning.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
So great, I love a team.
that was good.
Thank you, Mr. Parenquin.
I do love a team, that's great. What is, does that,
I like
I
that.
like that, because then it's all students. We're not focusing
And-
on, it can
Right.
include all students, or students that fall into that vulnerable category because of something.
unique to them,
Unique-
right?
unique
So
to them.
you might not be inadvertently excluding a student.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, thank you, okay. Any other, before we start talking about ranking, any others that we'd want to clarify? Or eliminate?
With the avoiding short-term fixes in favor of prioritizing long-term fiscal solvency, I feel like as this is obviously a situation that is not normal, right? And because of that, it's going to necessitate some amount of short-term thinking because we're going to have to address this for this school year. And somewhat, I mean, the state as a whole is facing this issue, right? It's not just us, it's not just Seattle, it's not just the 12, 13 school districts that are facing, being taken over. It's everyone, everywhere. And to me, that means there needs to be a bigger resolution, right? Like it can't come only from the school districts. It will never work. And so I don't know if that one, I like it. I like the idea of planning for the future. But when we're facing something like this and we're looking at such huge numbers, I mean, if that's like the amount of cuts we would have to make to get $205 million, that's almost that's a good, 20% of our entire budget of 1 year is, I mean, granted it's over 4 years, but that's a lot of money. And I don't know what you would have to cut to be able to get there. And so, that's kind of what our reserves are for, is to take care of that for that time until we can fix it, whether it's through levies or it's through government action at the state level or the federal level. I don't know, but it just feels like we're going to have to make short-term decisions, at least for this year, if not for the next couple of years.
So are you, just to clarify, are you saying that you would remove that as an option, or you would just, that you would deprioritize that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just feel like it almost is like, I don't think we can. I mean, it'd be great if we could, but at this point, I just don't feel like that's where we're at.
I think I think if we go back to the conversation of the principles, right? If we go back, it's a principle that we want them to kind of think about. We are gonna have to make short-term fixes, right? We know that, right? We're gonna have to come up with something in the next couple of months. But I think the other thing is, if they look at two options on the table and they're like, this one is gonna help us this year and next year, that's the option I would want to be presented with versus
Yeah.
the one that's gonna save me $1 million right now.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the only one that stands out for me, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but putting business hat on, number 8, honor negotiated agreements. I think there might be situations where we have to break leases or contracts in the best fiscal interest of what the next couple years are gonna look like. So if we sign a contract that says for the next 15 years, we're gonna be paying X amount of dollars, or it's gonna cost a quarter of that to get out of this contract, but that's gonna position us in a healthier financial situation in 5 years, I think we should have the option of exploring those routes.
No, I appreciate that because, by the way, my team has been, like any other team in every district probably in the state, has been looking a lot, and that is our contracts.
Right.
You know, you have to look at what you currently have. Can you do something different? I've asked my team to scour that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Can I just clarify though?
Yeah.
That are you suggesting that we deprioritize it or remove it from the list as an option?
I would personally want it removed. Or maybe worded differently, because the way it's written now says, if we have a contract that's in an agreement, we're going to honor it regardless. I would like to see something that has a little bit more flexibility, where the administration could make that hard decision to break a lease or a contract early and pay the penalty if it means it's gonna position us better in the future.
I think that you're still, from what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
on that though, is even going through that mental exercise, the assumption is we try to follow the agreements that we have. However, it might be with it being deprioritized on the list. Like if it's number 1, that's saying one thing about
Yeah.
where our priorities are. If it's number 10, what that means is, yes, as much as we would, what I would read that as much as we can, we've made agreements, and our word, we're trying to say, keep that as much as possible, but when it makes financial sense for us,
Yeah.
it's a deprioritized priority.
And I want to be clear, there are labor agreements, and then there are contracts. I was
That's
talking
what I
about
was
contracts.
just gonna ask.
Contracts.
We're
So just
talking
to be clear-
contracts.
Not like
Is that part of
CBAs.
both?
That's why I
Yeah.
want to just clarify.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah, I'm
that
thinking
apply
like-
to both, or is it just, are we talking about negotiated contracts with our staff as well?
I'm
as-
talking about just like with distributors, materials,
Right.
supplies.
Well, but I'm wondering, what
Oh,
does
what's
that mean?
this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what does this mean
Yeah.
to our superintendent? Like, is that what you're thinking this is?
It is broad. It was put there for that reason.
Yeah.
So
it's
it's
broad.
broad.
I'm guessing.
It has
Yeah.
shown up on a lot of lists.
So other districts have, so just to clarify,
Yeah.
other districts have this on their list and they have it
Or
broad so they can be.
variations
Yeah,
of.
variations, and it can be either or. It could be at the discretion to say, oh, it's gonna be contracts with staff, or it could be vendor contracts or other contracts.
There-
And that's why
'cause
it's
there's quite
written
a
that
few.
way.
And I agree, I think where it falls in relation to the others is actually the helpful
Helps
context.
identify it.
Yeah.
I wonder if separating that out into 2 different ones might be beneficial, just so that
Sure.
we can have a priority of our contracts with our staff versus our contracts with businesses. Like, if we lose our contract with, I don't know, like, not Microsoft, obviously, but let's go with Microsoft. Say we were able to somehow, divorce ourselves from Microsoft and it saves us $50 million a year. That's obviously not the case. But if it were, that might be something to really look into, right? You might say, okay, well, I guess we might want to look at getting out of that, and it's gonna be a huge change, but it saves us enough money to make it worth it. And that, I don't feel like, is the same conversation as, well, we have this contract with our bus drivers, and we end up, doing something that basically makes it so we can't hire bus drivers. Like, if we do something like that, where we make it so that we are not competitive in the entire market, that could be very problematic.
Right.
And those 2 things I don't think are equal in any way.
So instead of having 2, what if we just change it to negotiated agreements or CBAs with labor? Because I don't think the other one even needs to be included in this.
I think that's fair.
Or I feel some wordsmithing happening.
Thank you, Vice President. So, again, this is for Mr. Perrin. We actually were trading back and forth here, labor agreements, but collective bargaining agreements is what I was I didn't say.
Honor collective bargaining
Versus
agreements.
contractual services agreements.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yeah, I agree.
So we could reword it as
reword it.
honor collective bargaining agreements and call that
And
good.
just call it good there.
And then
Call
call
that
it
good.
good.
Excellent.
Would we want to remove the minimized reductions in force, because that would also be included in that, would it not? Like,
No,
because our
'cause-
RIFs are done through those contracts.
Not all.
Not all,
No.
all positions are in that collective bargaining.
I see.
This is really good. All right, what other, before we start ranking, any other wording changes?
I guess I'm going back to what President Margot said about the keep schools open. Now I'm reading it as it is too broad. How many schools? All
Right.
schools? Do we need to go that specific with this?
It's all your call. It's all your call.
Because technically,
You
if
know,
we
yeah.
shut down 3, we're still keeping some schools open. And so, does this allow room for?
And again, this is not saying that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It provides guidance for exploring options.
And remember, it also provides guidance to our community. Like, they know, they see this and know that's our priority, and here's where we put it in the list of priorities.
Right.
And so, because I know for a fact that the community will be livid if we decide we're gonna close 10 schools or some craziness, right? And, I mean, just look at what Seattle had happen, right? And they went from closing 10 schools down to 5 schools, down to 3 schools, and then they were like, no schools. It's like, that is worse than not saying we're not closing schools at all and just dealing with it on the back end somehow, I feel like. Because then it just gets people's hackles up, and then you start driving people away. People don't want to get involved. They think that you're not doing things the way they want you to do them, that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I think we need to keep it, but I don't know where you put it in the list.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out again to clarify that that was one district that I thought of. There are other districts that went through this. And I do not know what their boards did to prioritize or how they came up with that, or I don't know what the cost savings would have been. I also don't know what revenue generating strategies or principles they also talked about. So, yeah, and I think for us, it is, and what I shared earlier, it is incumbent upon us to really understand what that really means. That's why I appreciate the conversation. Because when I do come back, or the board gives me that guidance, I can come back and, like I said earlier, tell you, here's what really that cost would be if you did, or if you didn't, here's what that cost would be. Because I also said, we wouldn't run schools with operation costs that exceed what our enrollment would be. We want to make sure that we're providing the services we need for the kids that we have and that we're focused on.
I think that to provide context, this comes up because, again, with enrollment declines happening for a host of different reasons, I think some communities have seen corners of their district with steeper declines than, as opposed to the peanut butter question. Is it peanut butter, or do you find it in one geographic area? And that's when the school conversation pops up. But back to the question, do we need that to be more specific, or is that enough to,
No, now that I think about it, let's keep it.
okay.
I like the broad personally, because I think it gives more opportunity for creative thinking of
Yeah.
possible solutions. And we're going to hear solutions that are untenable.
No, I agree.
And-
That clipped out as I was speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No, it's good to talk
It's
through.
perfect. It's perfect.
Well, and I think the other thing is, what I like about it is keep school open. Well, we're gonna keep them all open, but we're gonna shorten the work week. It's gonna be 4 days instead of 5 days, or it's gonna be half days, 2 days a week, or it gives you more flexibility. All the schools are still open, but you're adjusting that time. And that principle is still being held, and we're still making sure that that's being held, but it gives us flexibility on solutions.
Okay. Any other wordsmithing?
No, nothing. Good.
Okay. So there's a couple different ways we can do the ranking, but I think this has been a great conversation. I'm going to keep us going. Would anyone like to make a proposal for the first one? What should be number one?
I'm proposing comply with state and federal mandates, just so people know that we keep those kind of at the top.
I like that, but I think keeping minimized impact on student programs, I think is so important because that should be our guiding principle, right? Like trying to ensure that we are providing the same level of services that we possibly can. And then beyond that, we will do the other things. But it should be and it doesn't have to be that necessarily one, but it should be something that is directly focused on students, I think, because it sets the tone for the rest of it.
Hold on one second. Did you have a
Yeah, I
have a
just
thought?
wanted, maybe just
Yeah.
something else for the board to consider is, as a principal, probably right after that one is, as a guiding principle, advocating for adequate federal, state, and local funding. And that can be for program as well, because that is something that we've been doing, but just something to consider.
I don't know if it's part of,
9.
I don't know if it's that us advocating for adequate funding can happen no matter if we do all or none of these, like, right? Like that's
much-
kind of outside,
yeah.
but that
Because
to
how
me
much
is-
money would we save by not doing that?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a board role and an administrative role, like this is what we do because this is the role that
Yeah.
we've taken. And so I would put it outside of that because I think no matter what that's part of our elected position.
And
A
that's fair.
commitment, a
That's fair.
commitment as opposed to a guiding principle.
Yes.
Two different things, yeah.
I just saw that under number 9.
Yeah, true.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, the long-term fiscal responsibility part, I
Yeah.
guess for me, I just lumped under the advocacy and.
Yeah. Going back to Vice President Cook, to me, I always, students first. And so number one was my number one, because whatever touches our students first, whatever has the most impact on our students first is what I would prioritize it. And while I think state and federal mandates need to probably be in the top 3, I don't know if I would place it as my number one.
Yeah, I like minimize as number 1 as well.
Okay. You know, and I was thinking maybe my prompt could be a little better. Instead of saying which is the number one, although it sounds like we have number one as number one. Instead of going through all of them like that, maybe we'll say, does anyone have a suggestion for a shift of the rank as it's on here? That might be a little easier for us to do together. And the language I have for number 10, the written number 10, in case that impacts it, is protect services that eliminate barriers to learning.
I would like to move that one up.
I agree. I think it speaks directly to the learning of our students, and I think those are important to show what we prioritize, which is again, our students. And the rest
Where
of
would
this,
you move it to? What would you put it in front of?
Minimize reductions in bores.
yeah, probably
Okay.
somewhere around
The new number 5?
five-ish.
I would advocate to keep it at 10.
Really?
Professionally, like that is my bread and butter and everything that I do, is I serve the vulnerable populations. But looking at this when, because we're putting this under guiding principles for budget planning, I think some of the other listed items do take priority in terms of how do we keep a district running. And I think there are other ways where we can connect and partner with community-based resources if we get to a point of desperation of having exhausted all of our options and our students do need these additional supports. But without the other ones in place first, we may not have the schools to be operating to even be able to provide those services.
And I guess I take it from a different perspective. I don't look at it like the other stuff happens first and then that is the last thing. It's like we're saying, yes, you're still going to make cuts wherever you have to make cuts, but you're going to take the fact that we believe in equity enough that we first say, these students, we are going to make sure that we try to do our best to make sure that our students that are most vulnerable or facing difficulty in schooling, that we're going to start there and say that's our first group that we want to make sure that we're protecting that as we can, even though we may have to make changes that may end up still impacting them because it impacts everyone.
And the other reason why I'm advocating for it higher is because that number of students in that bucket is going to be small. And a lot of districts look at that number and go, oh, it's only 5,000, we have 24,000 students approximately. And that population is only 1,000. So we're just gonna impact those 1,000 students and that's okay. Because the rest of everybody, and that's why I'm advocating to have it be higher, because oftentimes in budget crises, and I've seen other districts do it, they look at that number and go, oh, it only impacts 100 people. But they are the people that they will be the people that don't graduate. And then we're not doing our job. Because
I mean,
my
a
job
perfect-
is,
yeah.
we should be able to help everyone. So that's why I'm advocating for it to be higher in the list. Not to say that we won't make decisions
That do impact them.
that do impact them, but really think about, even though it's a lot smaller number, we gotta make sure it's at the forefront.
Well, and I think taking into consideration like how it's going to impact them, right? So like us removing money going to, say, iGrad is going to impact those students much, much greater. Like it is highly unlikely that if you take funding away from that and let's say you reduce the ability to serve those students by half or something like that, those half of those students, they're just not going to graduate. They're just not going to go to school. If we make it any harder on them to get that education, they just are going to say, I'm fine, I don't need it. I didn't want to go to school anyway, And that's what I just don't want us to be, throwing them out because we say, well, we're trying to save all this money and, they're not that important. It's like, well, if our most vulnerable are not important, who is? To me. Like,
I don't think this is a decision or a scaling of morality or judgment on the identities or backgrounds of the students. I'm seeing it as strictly from a budget planning perspective. If we did move it up, I mean, we wouldn't have those programs if we decided to keep those over honoring CBAs because we won't have the staff or the teachers to do it. We can't do that if we avoid short-term fixes because of budget allocation. We wouldn't be able to do that because we're prioritizing the programs and we're preserving operations, but the operations need to come ahead in order to keep those services running and operating. And so I think logistically, it just makes sense that it falls lower because without those things scaffolded in place, I don't see how we can position ourselves that ethically and efficiently provide that service.
So I feel like that's like an all or nothing thinking, because then you're saying that, well, we're going to preserve current operations as much as possible. And if that's above the other one, we're going to do the one below it first. And it's like, I don't think that's the way I would think about it. I would think about it in a hierarchical sense of this is our entire priorities and you need to take all of them into consideration. And the ones up at the top take a little bit more than the ones at the bottom. But it doesn't mean that the ones on the top aren't going to be impacted right away if they have to be.
And I would like to point out too that in terms of how they rank, I think there's probably going to end up being 5 different opinions really on how it sorts out, which is why, again, they're guiding principles, right? They're not a scoring rubric that we'll have to go through, right? What maybe a counter question might be, is there something that you definitely would want above that? And if it's all of them, that's okay. But I just wanted to make sure we call out, just to understand your thinking, is there something that you definitely would want to make sure is above protecting services line?
Yeah, I think the first 4
Okay.
for sure.
Right.
I would keep those. And then if we were to move the last one about protecting services, I could see it maybe going in 9, possibly 8.
I put between 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the conversation, in my opinion, would be different if this was creating guiding principles for like our values of what drives us to want to protect students. But when it comes to budgeting, I think this is one of those topics where we have to make some of those hard decisions.
I think 9, I'm fine with it being above 9 for sure,
Yeah.
because
I could see it around.
I do think that there are some short-term things that we need to keep in our arsenal of options.
Yeah.
We've talked about negotiated agreements and current operations. I feel like with number one being there, I feel like that I have some flexibility in like how it's currently done. Maybe we keep the program, but it's maybe not done in the same way
Right.
that's being done today.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No, I could
Interesting.
support
I
moving
could-
7 down.
I would support moving 7 down, because the way we're currently doing it is the
It's too
same
expensive.
cost.
Yeah.
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
But if you could say, hey, we're gonna keep this student program, but we're gonna have this group come in and do it instead, and they're gonna take over the cost, and now it only costs us half of what it did before. You're not preserving current operations because we're not growing the program, but you are saving the money, and that would be okay for me because you're still preserving number one.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I would be comfortable moving, just to reiterate, number 10 between 7 and 8. Or, sorry,
6 and 7.
between 6 and 7.
Yes.
Okay, got
Okay.
it.
So
But
it would
any
be
higher
number
than that,
7?
I think the ones above it, for me, are prioritized correctly.
Okay.
I would be okay with that. I'd just say it needs to be higher than 10.
So move it to 7?
Move it to 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do I hear moving preserve current operations lower? Was that a
I
thought I
could see
picked up?
that
Or
being a 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be
I-
10.
Maybe
Certainly.
flipping the 2.
what do we think about that?
Yeah, I would flip them.
Yeah, I agree. I think.
I wouldn't put it above, below 9.
Yeah, you might, I mean, I think you're probably
I
right,
wouldn't
because
put below
that's,
8.
it is more
Okay.
important than that, I think, to
Okay.
some extent, and
Yeah.
I would keep.
Okay, well, again, draft, you're gonna
Yeah.
be
It's a
looking at
draft.
it again. You're gonna be looking at it again. It's a good set of principles.
yeah.
I'm letting it percolate a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so we're moving number 10 to number 7. We're
Number 10 to
moving
number 7.
7 to number 9.
I
And then
didn't
moving 9 to
move,
10?
no, I didn't move
No,
number
she
7
just
up.
moved them down.
Just moved them all. Bumped down.
Slid them down.
Oh,
So
7 goes
number
to 8,
10
8 goes
is
to
now
9, 9 goes to
avoided.
Yeah,
10.
it just bumps everything
Yeah.
down.
Okay,
I would be
okay.
okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, same.
So move 10 to 7, and then
Everything
like
else
7,
down.
8, 9 become 8,
8,
9,
9,
9,
10.
10, yeah,
Okay.
Okay. I'm okay.
okay. All right. So I'll get, you all may be taking notes, but just in case, I'll email over what I've been keeping. I think that's a really solid set of principles. I love the clarifications as well, that's great. How are we feeling? We have 30 minutes left. We have one more thing that I think will help you all. How are we feeling, though? I want to take a pause because this is a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, no one likes this work.
No one likes
We
this
all want to
work.
be talking about what cool new program are we going to come up with? And,
Yeah.
lollipops on Fridays and was it
Well,
Bonnie
ice
Bell
cream
in the,
social.
bathrooms, but no, it's, I think it's good work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, as a leadership team, sometimes the task is just to get your community through it, right? And so this is a tool that will help the district and the community get to the other side. Okay,
Okay.
I do have a question.
yeah,
So we are going to have potentially new board members, right, in a couple of months. Is the recommendation after that new board is set to revisit these? Would they change those or use these still as principles as they go through? How often would we change these? That's my I guess that's, like quarterly, do we relook at them as principles? Because something may have shifted.
I would think with
yearly.
each annual cycle would be my suggestion. I'd love both of your attitudes, because again, you have looking at the 8 million for this year, this set
Right.
would be for this year.
Right.
But then, at some point in the schedule, you'll be looking forward to next year.
Next
And
year.
at that point will probably be after new board members have joined.
Right.
And so you have both the added benefit of learning a bit from the first go-round, and then you might just want to prioritize differently for the second. What do you all think of that?
Yeah, no, what I would say to that is that, in some districts, there are new board dynamics every year, and sometimes
Right.
sooner than the year. And so it is, I believe, the fiduciary responsibility of each board member, new that comes on board. The onboarding process is about learning and learning what were those guiding principles. Part of this is the work that's been done in the past. And I would say that about a strategic plan as well. I need to get myself, if I'm a new board member, up to speed on what it is, and what I don't know, hopefully in the onboarding process, or the questions I might ask are around that. So I understand what the guiding principles are, and I probably even watch this tape.
Maybe, right? And also too, I mean, in any year that new board members are coming on, they are dropped into the middle of a budget rollout anyways. It's just the nature of the calendar.
Right.
And so this would, you need to be able to kind of preserve that cycle, which is, it's actually something we call out in board boot camp because it is frustrating, right? Like that's not what I expected when it was my first year, but it's just the nature of the calendar and how it's set out in law. So, but very good thought.
Just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. I do also want to point out that anybody that is currently on the ballot has been invited to either come and watch tonight or are given the information to be able to watch this via our live stream. Obviously, it's also posted that they could be able to watch this at any time. So, so that at least that knowledge is there, because we do acknowledge that there is a lot to learn when you first start on. I also say that I think this kind of process that we talked about on page 32, the board's role of financial stability, of kind of the create goals, identify new measures, monitor progress on a regular basis, and adjust as necessary. You know, I also kind of saw it as kind of an annual, how did we do last year? Similar to how we evaluate, you know, how we did on our strategic goals every year. Do we need to update those and things like that? So that's where I saw that.
I just want to make one correction. You mentioned the 8 million. It's actually 20.4 million. I just want to make sure if anyone's watching that
Okay,
they
well,
are.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I had one little line. And
That's one part.
Thank you for the clarification. It's very important. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so there's one last thing I want to help you all with. And so that is with operating protocol. So if you remember, right, in April, we came up with some group agreements. And so here's a copy for you. We'll pass these out. So what I did is I took them, and you'll actually see them at the end of this. So at the back, you'll see, I'm going to borrow this just for a quick second. On the second page is the actual group agreements that we documented in April. And then I summarized them in a one-sheeter. Okay, and also I changed the language because some of the language was what to avoid, and I always think it's better to be affirming and have it in positive phrasing. So I'd love you to take a look at this because again, you have a lot of decisions ahead of you. You are going to be taking on a lot of stress from people. It can be, again, the push and pull that's going to be on your Rubik's Cube is going to be there. And this is based off of conversations you've already had. So I'd love you to, let's give you a minute and see if you have any comments on it. If there's anything you feel like you want to keep going, I actually brought an example of another boards. I brought Tacoma's because I love it. It's also a one-pager. I've seen board operating protocols that are 13 pages long. Some boards, their culture, they like to be very specific. They are very specific. I think that sometimes a one-pager is helpful too. But you don't necessarily need it. I just have it in my back pocket. But let me give you a minute and see what you think. one more minute. So as much as possible, I kept the verbatim words you used. In April, it's hard to think back. That's why I put I thought maybe that would spur some memory of the conversations you had. I just rearranged and aligned into categories. I categorized them. But any thoughts?
Support effective decision-making, we will, and it's the fifth bullet point, decide as a group when agreed upon decisions need to be reopened. We followed Robert's Rules of Order, and so,
So that would work, yeah.
I mean, that would be when we just follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, what do you think? That could be more clear?
Oh, just rewording it for that? Is that what you're?
Yeah, because it's true. You have to make a
I think
motion,
we-
have a second, have the majority
I mean, I
vote on
think with
that.
everything, I mean, that's what we strive for is Roberts, and so I don't know,
Yeah, no, for sure.
I don't know if that one necessarily to me that seems, I don't know if I would put that one in there.
Okay.
Because
What do you-
because there is a protocol for doing that.
And that is captured elsewhere.
That's captured as we follow Robert's Rules of Order, and that would be
Yeah.
like,
Oh, so just striking it off the
yeah,
list?
Yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
there's a
Sure.
process by which we do it.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm fine with
Okay.
that.
We can do that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I want to clear. You want to remove it from the list because we follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes.
Okay, now,
Yes, I understand now.
It could-
It-
And it
because-
could inadvertently conflict with
Yeah,
that.
but
Yes.
that's what,
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
We don't need to make a separate process from the process that already exists.
got it. I was unclear for, thank you.
Yes.
Now, sometimes what people will do is, there's different ways of operationalizing these, let's just say. Oftentimes, boards will have, which is why I think it's great to have a one-sheeter, we'll have it on the dice with them, right? And it can be actually a tool to work with your colleagues to say, oh, I think, I just heard you say something, but, as we try to use multiple types of data in decision-making, what we might want to consider is this, right? Like you use it as a tool when you're processing the difficult decisions. And that's why sometimes people will laminate them even to keep them up on the dice with them. Sometimes people actually put them into a policy and adopt it formally as a policy, which is something you can do either way. I've seen both ways being effective. Again, it depends on the culture of the board.
I think putting them in policy is a little difficult just because they're not things that you can like
Measure.
hold someone account to.
Right.
Some of them, being respectful, I agree, yes, respectful. But if you think you're being respectful and the other person doesn't, are you gonna punish them or something?
So people make it a procedure under policy 1620, which is the board superintendent relationship policy.
I see.
If you're curious, that's what people do.
I think it's interesting because there's definitely a skew in this towards slowness as opposed to making decisions. That's what I'm reading in here. Recognize time and effort. There's a couple different places where it kind of says that. The time decision, as opposed to being reopened, that was in there. I think it's for me, it's an observation as opposed to I see the first one, respectful of each other's time commitment. And so that one seems like if you put the two of the first and the last against each other, they almost seem to me, antithesis of each other. Like, be respectful of each other's time commitment, which means like, we put in a lot of time, you should have done your pre-work, read this beforehand, we all got it. So show up, ready to go, let's talk about it, let's make a decision so we can move on. And then the last one, recognize time and effort may take, and that's like, so are we going to make a decision, or are we gonna continue to bring this up and up and up? So I just think it's interesting that there's a juxtaposition of those two, I feel like.
What do you all think? It's hard to
kinda
remember back in April.
I see it a little bit different. Like the way I look at this idea is that we're a deliberative body, right? And the idea that we get everything done in our heads beforehand and then come in and we just like go through the rote motions, like that's where I get, like, I guess where my mind goes with that. And so like, I want to make sure that we are being deliberative and that every decision we make is discussed and discussed openly so that there's no question as to why we made a decision in everything we do.
Yeah, I guess that there's a difference between everything being discussed and everything being discussed 12 times.
Yeah, and I agree, but that's what Robert's Rules is for, right? Like, and if a person doesn't have a second for what they want to discuss, it's shut down.
Did you have a thought, Teresa?
Well, I see them as different. So I see the first set as like, to work together effectively, you are gonna come prepared, you are gonna make sure that you have read all your stuff, and you sit on the dais and you commit to like reviewing all of your things. And the last section to me is how we show up on the dais, right? So to me, the first section is like, this is your pre-work and you need to come prepared, and the president or vice president or whoever has told you to get something done, you need to review your budget and understand this, and here's all the information and know what's gonna be on the agenda. And then the last thing for me is how we show up on the dais. We need to be respectful, we need to recognize the time. But I think also, what's really important is sometimes we need to push back because we're being asked to make a decision, right? So I go back to the green building last year. We gotta do this thing. And I'm like, whoa, I don't think we need to like remodel it yet. I don't think we have the right data. And our job was to push back, and now we have a better solution for the green building. I mean, we have a much better plan for it now, and we have a better cost assessment and everything else. So sometimes they seem like they conflict, but for me, it's like, we have to be, like, it is our job to be like, no, slow your roll, right? Slow your roll. We're not gonna green light that decision. We're gonna have more discussion, or we're gonna want input. So that's how I kind of read those kind of differently. It's just my take on the section.
Yeah, and I think making a decision is never, that is never the same as green lighting everything.
Yeah.
Those are two very different things.
Right, but I'm just saying that's how the public sometimes sees it, where they're like, we're coming and we're voting, and they think we're just green lighting something, but we've actually had like 7 meetings about it.
You're gonna have 7 budget meetings.
Yeah,
at
yeah, we're
least,
gonna,
it sounds
but
like.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, but sometimes I think when the feedback that we get sometimes from the public is, oh, I watched that meeting and you all just, it's like number 9.1. And we just all like, yep, we all are in favor, but we've actually had discussions as a board multiple times before it came to the vote. Does that make sense?
I would say in some cases, I think there are some times where we do get things at the moment or like the week before.
Yes, the week before.
So I don't think it's completely accurate to say that for every single item that we
Yes.
vote on, we've had multiple conversations. But going back to this one, I guess I read this as more of operationalizing our conduct in the moment and not so much this like repeated ongoing process of how we should be conducting. So I guess what I heard from President Margell is like she sees this as more of a continuation. And I viewed this as the moment when we're on the dais or having these meetings, these things are in effect for the moment. And so I guess, could we get some clarity around what the intent is with having something like this? Are we thinking more so of communicating and generating this idea towards a collective culture of what the board should look like moving forward? Or is this more of like a operationally defined stages of conduct where we should follow these guiding principles whenever we're here to meet?
My answer to that would be to go back to here. There in standard 1, let's see the luck I have. Yeah, standard 1, benchmark 1. So to provide responsible school district governance, a board conducts board and district business in a fair, respectful, and responsible manner. For me, this was your conversation on what that looks like for this board. And again, for some boards, that's 13 pages, right? But for you all, this might be what it is. And again, when you have all complex decision-making factors come at you, to have these all commonly understood, it eliminates having to talk about, okay, how are we going to communicate as well as make this complex decision at the same time? So it's a little bit of both, if that doesn't totally muddy the water for you.
It complicates it.
It does, doesn't it? It does. It does. And that's why, sometimes boards just have this, remember the conversation, and think of it as a tool to help them grow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a tool where if you find that a conversation's going on long, you can try to think about why that might be. Does someone need more information? Sometimes some people just need to process things longer for whatever reason. There could be a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding, either in purpose of the conversation, purpose of the decision, what the information meant that you're basing the decision on. There could just be a simple misunderstanding. And by having these common agreements, it kind of helps you sort through those faster. So I'm not helping unmuddy, I know. I think it is more a forward-looking, based on some common understandings.
Okay. Yeah, because depending on which perspective we're approaching this from, I agree with President Margell of if we see some redundancies or contradictions in here, we should look at either rewording or removing them. But if it's more of like a guiding set of operating protocols for like in the moment of just like those objective natures of these meetings, then I don't see them as like these forces that are going against one another. And so I guess that's where maybe like as the board, we can find that clarity on how do we want to view and utilize this document in front of us.
I think it's a great conversation to have. Are you curious about Tacomas?
Sure.
Or do you, it may be totally irrelevant because it's different. It's different. And so these, there is some value statements in here as well. So it's not just about decision-making, working effectively together. And I'm not saying we rewrite this today because we're almost out of time. But again, about thinking about your common growth together in service of the students. It's just kind of interesting to learn from our peers. And you'll notice a different emphasis. This also brings in work with the superintendent as well, where that overlap of the gears happens.
And is this the one that you were referencing, policy 1622?
This is actually, they have it on their board page. They don't even have it in policy. They have it on their board webpage. I copied and pasted it into a Word doc. I could give you other 1620Ps. There's something to think about. And another reason why I brought it to you, when organizations go through stressful times, it can be helpful to have some foundational conversations that provide clarity and kind of provide some grounding for the organization. That's why organizations often have mission and vision statements. Because when you have all these forces coming at you, having that clarity to start with can be really helpful and kind of calm the waves. And so it's not something that you have plenty of work ahead of you. I just wanted to again, share some work from our peers. Tacoma, over the last 20 years, has weathered some storms and come out on the other end pretty strong. And so I like to look over their shoulder and see what they're doing. And I think this is a pretty interesting piece, something to think about.
How will you present this to your board?
So we, in my board, we are a policy governance board. We have a whole, so on top of the numbered series, we have another layer of policies, and we have a category we call the Bs, because they're board roles and responsibilities. We are one of those really detailed culture boards. So we have multiple policies that have kind of taken the themes of this and gotten pretty specific.
So you're the 13-page board, that's
You
what you're
here
saying?
might be like the 25-page
Wait,
board.
wait, wait.
But that works for us. That's kind of policy governance for you.
We
That
don't
works
need
for
25
us.
pages. I'm
I
just
don't know if it would carry forward forever, but we had a lot of work that was diverting the board from the core, from here, right? Like
Right.
the core 6 areas, and we were getting sidetracked quite a bit, and the misunderstandings we were bumping heads more than we needed to, and it was impacting the whole organization. So we had stats on all sorts of things that we could see the impact. So this was the way we addressed it.
I think Tacoma's is interesting in that it feels like an interesting and maybe good balance of some specifics, but also some like visionary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like a good mix.
yeah.
Yeah, I like a couple things from it. I like how we separated ours into 3 different domains.
Yeah,
So it's like if we took a couple up here and just shoved them in this one.
You could
yeah,
do it.
I would like to take a few from here and put them into our categories.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left. How are you all doing? You have worked really hard. How are you all doing? We're not going to take time to really go through this. But, it would be helpful to kind of take a second. I mean, obviously, I don't know if there'd be anything we'd be excited about with the work we just did, but maybe there might be some possibilities to consider. A little glass half full. If anyone has anything to share about possibilities they're now thinking of, maybe some worries that are still on their brain that we haven't had time to process today.
I'd say I'm
There's-
excited for our changes to cell phone policy. I think us taking it on as a board and taking it on as a district as opposed to it being something that different schools are doing all haphazardly themselves, I think creates a lot more structure and helps to kind of just have a standard for it, which I like.
I'm excited about how we're approaching our curriculum and how we're really looking at how it's impacting our students and then making decisions on changing it with data. And I like how we're doing that. So I like what we're doing with our curriculum and how we're addressing it and implementing it and all those, we get that information back from the schools and how impactful it is, and you see the difference in math, and I think that's really cool. What we're doing there is really cool. And I'm also excited about the investments we've made in our capital projects that have needed to be done. So we've made those investments, we got the levy, we've done the bonds, and we've done all these things, and now we're seeing those come to fruition because they were on hold for a lot of years because of COVID. So I feel like we're kind of finally over that hump, and that's kind of exciting, is to see those plans that we made years ago, and now we're seeing them implemented, and kids are excited about it. I go down to Mill Creek and they're talking about, we get to use the football field. They're excited about that because
That is
before they
cool.
were all on the, they're all on the front grass, and now they get to use that field, and that was a long time coming. So I think I'm really still excited about how we're engaging with the community and making those things happen.
Thank
And of
you.
course, I'm worried about the budget. I think we all are.
What about you? Anything
Yeah,
to
I
share?
think from the several school visits and interactions I've been able to have with just the district admin plus the teachers and people working at the various schools, I've noticed a shift in morale And I think that gives me a little bit of excitement because now I'm curious to see and I guess inquire a little bit more as to what's contributing towards, I guess, the change in energy that I've seen from comparing this year to last year. Even though we're going through some of these, I guess, more federally guided transitions with like the budget cuts. So far, all the teachers and classrooms that I visited, I've noticed there was an increase in energy and happiness, morale, and just investment into their classes. And so it'd be curious to kind of monitor that a little bit more and see how we can sustain that.
Thank you. What do you think, Tim?
Just waiting to see how things go forward.
Fair enough.
I'm excited at the last couple of board meetings that we've had, and very specifically around some hard topics, both today, having us all here, and then the last meeting where I think it was 2 regular meetings ago, where we are all together, talking about maybe some hard things that are going on, but having everybody present. One, truly actually being here and being present helps me because I'm hard of hearing. It's really nice to be able to hear when I can see somebody's lips talking and be in presence. And I think that we have robust conversations to get through things and be able to come to a decision as a group and be able to move forward and you know, get consensus. So I've been really encouraged at getting through some really hard topics. I mean, today, talking about budgets, it's a hard topic. And so I'm encouraged by, excited, the right word, sure, by, you know, a couple of these sessions that we've had. And I also am excited by that I feel like we have some good things in place to make sure that these really big pillars of what it is for us as a board to do are set up, that we can have some of these, and that I talk about, like, I don't like feeling behind always, like we're getting to the conversation before, after it really can make a difference. And I think we all take time away from our families and do this because we care about the work. And it feels like right timing that work throughout the school year is important. And so I'm excited that we have that kind of built in and have that partnership to do that, so.
What about over here on the side of the table? Anything you think of?
Yeah, I think I'll concur with a lot of what's been said. I think I'm really excited about, when I look at year, I think of each year. My first year was a remote year, for those of you who were not here. So imagine where we've come to date. We've had a new strategic plan. I'm excited at how we've continued to make progress, and we keep sharing with the board on how we're doing with those goals. I'm excited about, even with the tough conversation we have had to have today, that the board worked together on really understanding each other about, so what does that mean? Because that's really helpful for my team. Worrisome, I think that's, evident in what's happening. Mr. Parangwa and I are looking at just the latest update on federal stuff, right? So that's always going to be continued. What information do we need? I think we just see how things are going, right? Let's keep touching base with each other, looking at how we're doing. So that's what we need to know. And that fits with the suggestion, keep doing that, the work on behalf of our kids.
So there we go. Perfect.
Well, I think that we started 5 minutes late because of our technical difficulties, and that we're wrapping up at 8:02 is actually pretty good. I feel like that is substantial compliance. Are we good with that? So, thank you. Thank you to everybody's comments, participation. It really does, I feel like I am better by the conversations that we have and being able to hear what other people have to say and building upon that and using it to test how I feel with that. So I'd also like to say we couldn't do this without you. Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys are great to work with. My pleasure.
Yeah, you have helped us, and I love that you're bringing back the things, and so it's never one and done, is that this is a continual improvement process. And so thank you for the hard work that I know that you put in the pre-work to get this done and
My
kind of make the
pleasure.
vision come to life. And so thank you for holding our hand through to this evening and guiding us through.
You guys
So,
are a great group. Doing hard work. You all are doing hard work. Thank you for all the encouraged/excited. That was lovely to hear.
great. Superintendent Bella, anything that you want to add?
No, just thank you to Amy as well. It was nice to see all the work that you've done before. Come here, applying what we're having to do ahead of us, and so, yeah, nothing but gratitude.
Just one more thank you to Mr. Parangao and your team for all the work that you put into this and keeping us continually updated. I also know that there is work done from throughout the administration for getting prepared for today in big and small ways, so thank you very much for that. And then last thing, again, just thank you to our students because you're the reason that we do all of this and you are the focus that why we do this. So it is 8:04 and we are adjourning the special meeting of the Kent School District Board.